Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. It's a sigh of relief for Go First. The National Company Law Tribunal, NCLT, has admitted application filed by Go First Airlines seeking initiation of voluntary insolvency proceedings. Now, Go Airlines moved the NCLT earlier this month to initiate the corporate insolvency process. Remember, Go First blamed the faulty engine supplied by American company Pratt & Whitney for the grounding of its aircraft. The company claimed to have lost over 10,800 crores owing to the fact that 50% of its fleet was grounded as of April 2023. Now, a two-member NCLT bench appointed Abhilash Lal as an interim resolution professional, IPR, to run the debt-ridden company. It has also put the company under full moratorium. Now, NCLT also asked to ensure that no employee is retrenched, nobody is sacked, and the entire workforce of Go Airline, in fact, stays intact. Now, on the show today, we are discussing the future of Go First and the aviation sector at large. Joining us at this point in time is Minoo Wadia, who is the founder president of Federation of Indian Pilots and former advisor to Jay Wadia, who was the managing director of Go First. Also with me at this point in time in the studio is my colleague Karthik Malhotra. Joining us also is Dheeraj Mathur, aviation expert. Gentlemen, appreciate you taking your time out. Minoo, I want to come to you directly and ask you, what's the future of Go Airlines looking like as of today?
Many years, I didn't think Go Airways really had a very good future for various reasons. If most people ask today, this is a happy situation, as you announced earlier with NCLT. In my opinion, NCLT should have been the last resort and not the first resort for Go Airways. Because I am directly involved in another NCLT issue of, if you've heard of Lavasa, which is also in NCLT. And I can assure you it's not a good experience going into the NCLT, and the process is not what it seems on paper. But as far as Go, let's focus on that. I'll talk about Go and other airlines also in similar states. See, most of the airlines which have been started by owners for whatever reasons they have had. But the owners have never been, or hardly ever been, the aviators themselves, or having a passion for aviation, or the knowledge of aviation. That is the main reason the owners, you may hire a CEO, you may hire a managing director, but if the owners don't have the understanding of running an airline efficiently and profitably, no airline has a future. You've seen so many cases, this is not the first airline which has gone into a problem. There were other owners, without naming them also. There are so many in India who have had the same grave they've gone through, mainly, essentially, because the owners did not understand. If you want an example, take the Air India itself. When Air India was owned by J.R.D. Tata, who had a passion for aviation, he was an aviator who understood aviation himself. Air India was one of the finest airlines in the world. When the owners became the government of India, who understood nothing about aviation, ever, that's when Air India became what it was and the state at which it became. So the knowledge and commitment of the owners matters a lot. Not blaming the CEOs or the situation. Yes, the engine may have been a problem, but didn't they foresee this problem earlier? So these are the essential things why airlines have a problem running in India.
Mm-hmm. In fact, if you talk to the management, and on the basis of what the management has been saying, that we were dealing with Pratt & Whitney for a while, we have taken them to arbitration. It was in fact Pratt & Whitney that did not honor the award of arbitration. We had raised this multiple times over the last few years, so we've done our best. So the blame squarely lies with Pratt & Whitney.
Well, of course, they will blame someone or the other who's responsible for the state. They will not blame themselves. But when you're saying the owners, please tell me whom are you talking about? Who are the owners today?
Okay.
See, Jay Wadia himself was the managing director at one point of time. And at that time, there was no... I was in Go only for a very brief period because the age of flying was extended to 65 years. So the last 1.5 years or so, I flew with Go. And I really managed or really ran the airline. But the management, the owners did not understand fundamentals of aviation. And there was no CEO, there was no senior person to run the airline. And without anyone having control of the airline, you're bound to go haywire.
And when it comes to the process of insolvency and bankruptcy, one of the questions that comes to our mind is, why did it had to go through insolvency in the first place? Did the promoters refuse to infuse fresh capital? We know that they have been infusing capital every now and then, but is there a sense that the promoters refused to infuse fresh capital, and hence financial viability of the airline was put in question, and therefore the need to go into insolvency? Lack of commitment, therefore, from the promoter's side at this point?
Financial problems are there in any case, but that is not the only thing. The understanding of how the airline is supposed to be, even if someone had pumped in a lot of money also, it's not the money itself, it's how to use that money, how it is. See, the airlines is a very technical field. It's not like any business. You have to understand aviation in totality, utilization of aircraft, utilization of crew, how the public PR, etc. And Go Airlines, you've never really, that's why I asked you the question, who's the management? Go has never had a good a management at all, in fact, I would say.
These are harsh statements you're making, Mr. Wadia, and I'm not sure, how well the Wadia group is going to receive these statements.
But I am a Wadia myself.
Of course. So namesake there. But just to understand from you, do you think specifically the problem was in the lack of enforcement or watertight contracting when the engines were being negotiated by Pratt and Whitney? Because if that was not the case, and that is where I assume the experience that you're talking about comes into play, of understanding and anticipating challenges that can spring up. But had those contracts been watertight and had those contracts been honored even by the US engine maker, would Go Air have been in this, would Go First have been in this position today, with it actually being, until it declared insolvency and went to NCLT, the fourth largest airline in India, in operation for 18 years and doing a record of what, 450,000 passengers 2-3 days before filing for insolvency?
Yeah, I agree with you totally.
Because the management is the same, sir.
Yeah, let us focus on now the Pratt & Whitney. And Pratt & Whitney is not a fly-by-night, overnight company. It's a company that has had good engines with a good track record for many, many years. And therefore, what you said is absolutely right. You should have understood the specific problems of the airline, how they could implement it. And you can understand and go with that only if you yourself understand the intricacies of aviation. And I have known and dealt with Pratt & Whitney also earlier. And in this particular case, if they've not honored the agreement, of course, the Wadias are perfectly right in taking action against them. But I am not familiar with that part of the story, so I will not even comment on that.
So you're saying for 18 years, the management has not understood the aviation business? Is that what you're actually alluding to? 18 years is not work experience for anybody.
You're using the word management. I'm using the word, the same thing differently, the owners. And see, when management can be just the CEO also, the managing director also. Right. When J. Wadia, unfortunately, he himself didn't understand too much about aviation. And he was surrounded for many years, right from the initial stages, by a few sycophants who misguided him, or he listened to them. But he was never prepared to listen to very high qualified professionals, etc. So just to give an example, since I have spent 46 years in aviation, and I've had a vast experience before coming to Joe. Normally people go up the ladder. I came from top of the ladder to below the small aircraft, and we were just to pass our time for since our age was extended to 65 years. And I virtually ran the airline, taking all decisions or small decisions or solving internal problems. But you needed to have a strong person right at the top, officially a managing director, CEO, to take these decisions and run the airline. And I have seen, at least during the brief period that I was there, that there was no one in control of the airline.
So what prompted you to leave the airline? Mr. Wadia, what prompted you to leave the airline?
I am from the armed forces. And then I flew for many years with Air India.
Okay.
And I retired from Air India because at that time the age was 60 of our license. So my license had expired. And I did a lot of things in aviation, not just flying. I've put a lot of things. Aviation safety and standards has been my passion. So I've been involved nationally and internationally also.
Okay. So I think the question that my colleague here is alluding to, what prompted you to leave the airline? And if we are to understand what you're saying here is, till the time you were there, the airline was in fact fully functional and making money in operation for the last 18 years. And you're blaming not just the current management, and by management I mean the people who are running the airline, as well as the promoter group for mismanaging.
Specifically answering your specific question, why did I leave the airline? Because that was the age I was allowed to fly. 65, my license expired. Once my license expired, I was not allowed to fly. So therefore, I was no more with Go Airways. Obviously, the license was valid till I was 65. And after that, I wasn't allowed to fly.
Are there similarities that you can draw with what is happening in Go First right now with what we saw 4 years ago happening with Jet Airways? Was the case, apart from faulty engines, was management the challenge even with Jet Airways in your opinion?
Oh yes, oh yes. Though Naresh Goel himself was from the slight, not directly involved with the aviation, but he was from travel agency, etc., etc. So he understood, and I have interacted with him also to quite an extent. But all of them, not only Jet Airways, take all the other airlines that have packed up also. The similar problem was there with most of them. Management not understanding the aviation industry as they should have.
Okay.
Mr. Kaushik Khona is not going to be very happy listening to you.
Facts are facts.
You don't seem to have any qualms about that.
So I think let's put the issue of management.
You probably don't know my background. I've been.
Yes, sir. Please continue.
I think there's a problem with the
what I'm saying is I've been involved with aviation standards, not only in India, but internationally also. As the India director for IFAL, that's the world body of pilots. I'm the founder president of the Federation of Indian Pilots. Plus, I've started an Institute for Education and Training as the Institute of Aviation and Aviation Safety. Plus, government appointed various panels also, and done a lot of things in aviation from the safety point of view. Vijaypat Singhania's world record in the hot air balloon altitude record, and government appointed committees, etc. So I have been involved in not only just flying, but in a lot of things directly with aviation.
Okay. I think let's put the issue of management aside for now, and let's look at this NCLT order which has come in. And why, for the management, whether the management is in the right or the wrong, as Mr. Wadia is alluding to, I think what really happens now is, for the foreseeable future, Go First is in a state of coma. Obviously, the fleet is grounded. They are not taking any more flight bookings. All scheduled flights stand cancelled. But I think the glimmer of hope for the management is the fact that it is right now under moratorium, which means the liabilities that it had to its debtors and its creditors, as well as the lessors who technically own the aircraft and have leased the aircraft to Go First. The lessors don't have any right over the aircraft right now until the moratorium is lifted and until the proceedings are over. Which means, there were talks 2-3 days ago, Shweta, if you remember, where SpiceJet and Indigo were both eyeing, and even Air India was eyeing the pilots and the cabin crew, and SpiceJet and Indigo were actually eyeing the aircraft itself. Now, the aircraft continue to be under the hold of Go First.
Okay.
So, the lessors cannot stake any claim on it as yet. At the same time, the 11,000 plus crores of debt that Go First has on its books right now need not become an immediate concern for the airline. So, until the insolvency proceedings are through and until the case finally comes to an end on whether Go First continues with its license to fly, whether it continues operations by taking maybe another line of emergency credit guarantee line that the government may offer to them. Until then, we seem to be in a state of coma with Go First. And there is a sigh of relief, obviously, for the airline, because it doesn't have to immediately take care of any of its debt and its obligations, given the financial crisis that the airline has already stated that it is in. And I think the second point of relief right now for the pilots is that in this moratorium period and until the NCLT proceedings are on, no pilots can be sacked by Go First. So that becomes an important case. Now, I think it's important to understand, can pilots themselves in this period resign and instead of jumping ship, in this case, jump airlines and move on to another airline? Because if you remember, coincidentally, Air India had come with a half-page ad in a couple of pink papers stating that it needs 1,000 odd pilots to service its fleet. Now, the models of aircraft that Air India operates are slightly different, but I think for the pilots, there's a clear-cut fitment with SpiceJet and with Indigo right now. And I've been made to understand, speaking to some pilot friends, that there is a demand for qualified Pratt & Whitney trained pilots who fly the Airbus A380neo to also take on offers from international airlines.
Okay.
So that's where we are at the moment, really.
At the moment, Mr. Wadia, you said that you've been closely involved with NCLT. We understand that Go First is hailing the fact that they have been given a full moratorium. What does that really mean for them? As Karthik rightly explained, it means that there is a sense of status quo at the moment, which means that the liability that Go First has towards its creditors as well as obligations, they are temporarily halted. They do not have to be complied with at this point in time. But what does it mean in general? How long does the NCLT process take?
One second. Normally, a pilot will not be familiar with all the NCLT, but just now, Lavasa, you must have heard of Lavasa city, which is in NCLT, and I'm directly involved in the middle of the whole problems. So let me apprise you of the NCLT process. First of all, the NCLT law itself says that the whole process has to be over in 130 days. If it has to be extended, it can go up to 333 days. But the NCLT process in Lavasa has been going on for more than 5 years, and they're not close to a resolution. Also, what you all seem to be happy about, that no action can be taken. Don't forget, the RP who's appointed to look after the airline, he has to keep it as a going concern. And the RP, I'm sure, I don't know what his background, I'm sure he's not an aviation person, so he wouldn't understand fundamentals of aviation. So the RP running and keeping so the earlier the problem is resolved, it is better for everyone concerned, including the financial creditors, for the airline, and from the NCLT process. So if it drags on, as many of the NCLT cases have been dragging on, it is not a good sign for anyone at all. So I would have thought myself that the Wadia Group or the owners of Go would have resorted or seen other options if they were available to them, instead of being happy with the NCLT process. Because NCLT, they have lost their money in any case. The creditors are likely to lose their money. They have to take a major haircut. And there'll be problems, as there have been problems in the past also, for the staff. Whether you're talking of only the pilots, why about the cabin crew, the ground staff, everyone? What are they going to do? If there's a moratorium, yes, a moratorium says that no action can be taken. Like, I cannot sue Go today because there's a moratorium. But what happens in the moratorium? Is the airline going to continue running efficiently as they should be running? So it's not a good sign at all. All this
airline is definitely not taking. Airline is definitely not taking to airs. We know that at this point in time. We were very clear on that. But what we are alluding to, in fact, is that there is some sense of relief for the management and for the employees who seem to have at least their jobs intact for a while. I think something very interesting that Mr. Wadia pointed out here, that NCLT process, although there is a set deadline, can extend. In this case, he pointed out the NCLT proceedings with Lavasa have been on for 5 years. We don't know what's going to be here. But, a concern that perhaps many people who are still employed with Go First, Karthik, is that they haven't got their salaries in a while.
Right.
And they are not being asked to go, but they will stay on, if at all they want to stay on without pay. That does not make much sense.
So as part of the NCLT proceedings, Shweta, there is an emergency deposit of 5 crore rupees right now, which doesn't seem much given the volume of debt that the airline has and the financial crisis that it's in. But about 5 crore rupees are being parked with NCLT to take care of any immediate expenses. Now, would pilot salaries include these emergency expenses or not? I think the tribunal should take that in its wake and understand that, yeah, this is something that must be honored right now. This is not an external vendor you're talking about. This is not a lessor. This is not a creditor you're talking about. And this is something which is vital to keep the airline and its staff alive.
About
Till
5,000 staff. 5,000 plus
till
employees.
as long as the proceedings are on, 130 days, 190 days, whatever it goes up to, perhaps there could be these installments of 5 crore tranches of such amount, which the NCLT can demand of Go First to keep parking with it to take care of these emergency expenses.
Okay.
I'm hoping for that at least.
Okay. Dheeraj Mathur is joining us at this point in time, who's an aviation expert himself. Dheeraj, thanks for taking time out. We've been discussing the future of Go First for a while now, and we've arrived at, to a point where we understand that NCLT process may finish within the stipulated timeline, in which case we may see Go First coming back on airs, but that is very unlikely to happen, and there have been precedences there before. What are your expectations, or what's going to happen with Go First?
Look, this is crystal ball gazing, right? Because you don't have a promoter anymore. So the question is, the promoter understanding the aviation business doesn't arise. And in fact, if you recall, our first low-cost carrier was promoted by a pilot himself, and we all know where that went. But frankly speaking, things being what they are, it will be very difficult for Go First to come back on air. Frankly speaking, it's because 50% of the aircraft is still grounded. Now, Pratt and Whitney has indicated that they are going to contest the enforcement of the Singapore Arbitral Award. So you're not getting any engine. So 50% of our aircraft are going to be without engine. And all their costs are, the fixed costs are still there, even if you get the other 50% up and running. But 50% is then going to service crew and craft and all of that 400%. So it's going to be very difficult, even if it gets manages to resolve the financial issues through some restructuring, etc. But the fundamental operational issues of the engines, until they are resolved, how can they even think of start flying again? Because they still have Pratt and Whitney engines, and I don't know I think Safran probably also makes similar engines, and I believe Indigo and Air India has switched to them. But until the engine issue is resolved, I don't think that it can start off.
Okay. I want to take the last couple of minutes to discuss what's happening with the aviation sector at large. And we here at Newsline have been doing so for a while now. In fact, one of the immediate problems that people, the passengers, have to face is the fact that there is obviously not many choices, and therefore the ticket prices are soaring on very common routes like Delhi-Mumbai, all-time high, about touching around 18 to 20,000, when it was about a week ago, 10 to 12,000. Right. So people are paying through their noses in absence of many players on ground.
So that is bound to happen, Shweta. Unfortunately, or fortunately, see, I'm a huge proponent of free trade and fair market practices. And lesser the government intervention in running businesses, the better it is for industries to flourish and companies, corporations to make profits, as the case may be. But in this case, I think airlines trying to take undue advantage of one player being knocked off the skies seems a tad too much and requires perhaps a little bit of price ceiling to be set and surge pricing to be set by the DGCA. Now, Go First, when it filed on 2nd of May, when it filed for its insolvency proceedings, commanded only a 7.8% market share, right? Now, of course, 7.8% is not a huge market share. It's not even a tenth of the market share. And of course, if you compare it to Indigo, which is about 56%, Air India combined about 26 odd percent. So between Spice and Go First, there's a 7% to 8% division of market share. Now, a 7%, 8% market player being knocked off and prices shooting up by 50%, 60% doesn't seem like profiting, it seems like profiteering. So now, I don't know, is there a room for intervention here? Should DGCA come and on some select sectors put a capping, put a ceiling that is all that is going to cost? But I think the DGCA would find that difficult to implement in any case, because airlines are not in the business of making money historically.
Right.
So if this is an opportunity for them to convert their profits and take them on their books, they are trying to milk the opportunity in the best way possible.
And the right opportune moment for them to milk the opportunity in this case. Mr. Wadia, you know what? One of the big takeaways from our discussion a couple of days ago was that aviation sector, aviation business is anyway not making money, and with one player knocked off the market, it is an opportune window for the remaining players to, you know, the fact that many of these routes were heavily discounted, the fares were heavily discounted, it's now an opportunity for these players to make the money that they've been losing traditionally. Would you agree with that, you know, analysis, or do you think it's about time that Ministry of Civil Aviation and the regulator must intervene to cap prices?
I would agree with you, but that's not my area of expertise. That's a commercial aspect, so I won't comment too much.
Okay.
Let me clarify 2 points which you marked off earlier. One is that you said that they've got 5 crores to handle this issue. Are you aware what the cost of NCLT, just the insolvency process is? To give you an idea, only the process of NCLT in Lavasa case, the fees of the consultants, the legal people, etc., is about 100 crores. So what is 5 crores today? It's peanuts, nothing, and nothing will happen in 5 crores to start with. Secondly, it'll be best for everyone. You were talking about, will they let the pilots go or should they go, etc. See, if the Go Airline is going to be shut down today or in a period of time, keeping people on the ground serves nobody's interest, neither the pilots nor the airline nor the DGCA. So if people would like to leave the airline, they should be allowed. If the dues are there, yeah, by all means they can take it up with the airline, what their past dues are. But they should all be allowed to leave and join wherever they would want to, because that's legally correct also and morally correct. Otherwise, how long the NCLT process? Suppose it goes on for years and ends. Do you expect the pilots or the engineers to sit on the ground with no jobs? So it is futile to talk about holding on to the staff who are already in Go. Secondly, people may not be aware that the law does not allow the original promoters to take, for example, the promoters of Go, Wadia Group, says tomorrow I want to take back Go Airlines and run it. They are not authorized to do it. They cannot do it. Once it goes into NCLT process, there has to be a process followed till the end. So the process, I'm not going into details, but it's very complicated.
Okay. Okay. Let me get Dheeraj in at this point in time. Dheeraj, you know, I think we've moved away from the fact that, and we were discussing here, price capping with aviation sector at large, and can the regulator intervene, should the regulator intervene? And interesting point there that Mr. Wadia said that the 5 crores set aside by Go First, or the requirement by NCLT, which is to set aside 5 crores, would not be enough to cover cost, at least for the existing pilots, the ground staff that has been employed by Go First. And Go First there has been told to not let go or not start the retrenchment exercise just as yet, to allow the existing staff, crew members to continue working. Do you think that 5 crore would be enough to you know, cover the cost of the 5,000 plus employees who are currently with Go First? And beyond that, do you think for consumers at large, it is important that we start capping prices to ensure that they're not paying through their noses?
Is that question for me?
That is correct, sir. It is for you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. Well, look, I think quite recently the government clarified again on a request from by the parliamentary committee that they would not like to interfere in pricing. So now, you know, so therefore that's something that is, I think, unlikely to happen. I agree as a consumer, you know, a 6,000 rupee ticket costing 25,000 is outrageous, and you know, it shouldn't happen. But I don't think there's anything the government can do. If it tries to intervene, airlines will say that, look, when we make losses, you don't, though the government has set up a credit line facility, but So they'll say that, look, when we make losses, we make the losses, and we have to cover them. Even if you're giving us credit, we still have to pay back what we borrow. So as far as capping is concerned, I mean, look, I think what's important for airlines is to understand that pricing has to be rational. You can't have gouging, and you can't have this kind of, which is virtual ripping off. So the pricing has to be rational. I think the airlines that are going to have to exercise some restraint and show that they are sensitive to consumers. But on the other hand, hey, if the market can bear it, that's the price that is going to be that the market will fix. So I mean, it's a tricky thing. There is no easy answer to this. But the government is unlikely to intervene. That's my view. Now, the second point you raised was about Cyprus is just for the insolvency process. It's not going to be anywhere near close to what it's going to cost to pay the crew, etc. And the other the vendors, of course, are going to get covered by the IBC process, but the crew and their salaries and so on. I mean, if people are leaving, it's best for them to be let go.
Okay.
Go get jobs elsewhere, and as and when the airline comes back on track, I mean, in fact, it makes no sense for them to keep on a fixed cost when there is absolutely no revenue in sight. Mm-hmm. So, if it was a question of a few weeks, then it's another matter. But right now, there is no clarity at all. I don't see how this thing is going to get resolved quickly. Especially, as I said, with Pratt & Whitney digging in its heels and saying that it's not going to honor the Singapore arbitration award and is going to oppose it in the U.S. Delaware court.
Okay. All right. So not much relief there for Go First, at least in the interim future. Before I let you go, and this is where I think, Karthik, you and I were discussing, specifically with regards to airfare, the idea of an aspirational India and more Indians taking to skies. And I think we disagree where I feel that the government needs to intervene in order to make the common man realize their dreams of taking to airs. In a country where less than 1% of Indians take to skies or get to fly in their lifetime, there is scope for the aviation sector to grow. But aviation players are not able to stand competition. And we have seen that traditionally, be it Kingfisher, Jet Airways, and now Go First. Where does it bring us? Where do we stand at the moment? And I think we're very far from realizing that dream until, and I know you're a proponent of free market economics, but I sincerely feel that the government needs to do something about it if it has a vision to have a robust aviation sector.
See, I think as long as the demand-supply equilibrium is met, even at 18,000 rupees for a Delhi-Mumbai ticket or a Mumbai-Hyderabad ticket or any common sector that airlines fly to, as long as that equilibrium is maintained, that people are buying tickets even at 18,000 rupees or higher and flights are going with all seats occupied, would there be need for the government to intervene and let airlines discount their potential earning and profitability? I doubt it.
Unlikely to happen. All right, gentlemen, we will keep tracking that story. Mr. Wadia, Dheeraj Mathur, Karthik, thanks very much for joining with your inputs on that very important story. We're going to shift focus for now. What happens to your money if you pass away without a nominee and without informing your family about your investments? The money remains unclaimed. At the end of February this year, nearly 35,000 crore rupees was lying as unclaimed deposits in over 10.2 crore accounts in various banks across the country. Now, it was 48,000 crore last year, so slightly less this year, but still a very significant amount. Now, not just bank account, it is said that 24,000 crore was also lying unclaimed in mutual funds as per a paper released by the Association of Registered Investment Advisors. Imagine all that money and nobody to claim it. Such is the concern around these unclaimed deposits that the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman asked regulators to initiate a special drive to settle unclaimed deposits within the banks and financial institutions as soon as possible. On the show today, where does this money go and what can regulators do to identify the recipients? Joining us at this point in time is Ankit Garg, founder of Garg Law Chambers. Also with us at this point in time is Shweta Kothari. Before we come to you, gentlemen, let us quickly play the bite of Finance Minister when she spoke to media just a couple of days ago. Okay, we don't have that bite at this point in time. So we're going to straight away jump into this very interesting topic of unclaimed deposits, 32,000 crore lying in the banks at this point in time. What happens to this money, Ankit?
For having me. So primarily it is important to understand what is unclaimed deposits. People generally have money lying in their bank accounts, that may be current account or savings account, and also in any term deposit or fixed deposits. When this money or when this account is not operated for a period of 10 years, it is called as dormant and inactive. The money lying in such an account is transferred under the RBI regulations to a fund called DEAF, that is the Depositor Education and Awareness Fund. So all this money gets transferred to the RBI, as was clarified by their February notification that 32,000 crore worth of amount is lying with the RBI.
Okay. The money goes to the RBI and is never claimed back, because obviously the claimants don't really know that there is a certain amount of money that's been parked in various banks by our immediate family members. What is the role of regulators and banks specifically, before I go to the role of regulators, in informing possible claimants of this money?
To be honest, there is no such regulation in which the banks are, mandated to reach out to the account holders or the nominees. Banks do not get to know when a person passes away, leaving behind certain accounts whereby money is contained.
But banks do know that this is unclaimed deposit.
They do. Whatever information banks have, for example, the registered address of the account holder, banks do send communication to the account holders so that they get in touch with the bank. But what happens in most of the cases is that people have moved their addresses and the new addresses are not updated with the bank. So in such a scenario, that money stays idle and then gets transferred to the RBI after a period of 10 years.
Okay. But Srinath, I think that's exactly where the problem is, and that is where the Finance Minister has also talked about, hoping to start a special drive where banks and regulators can in fact identify a possible claimant of this money, and this is a huge amount.
Yeah, that's true, but if you look at the historic perspective, a lot of these bank KYC norms did not have full details. Today you have the linkages to PAN, Aadhaar, mobile numbers, email IDs, and the outreach from the banks to customers. I mean, they can't give any excuse that it is expensive to reach out to the customer has moved homes. I mean, today, if you want to do WhatsApp banking, send a WhatsApp message in whatever language, the Indian languages, to the customer, it is possible. So I think I look at it as a proactive step, as one-time cleanup. And what will be interesting is if we get into the granular details, if at some point RBI will publish, will be to figure out how much of these deposits are less than 1 lakh rupees, less than 10,000 rupees, what are the actual tenure of these deposits. That will be interesting, right? I mean, we have a very transient urban migration pattern, right? People move from between cities for jobs. And if, let's say, they had some surplus money and they put in a money FD for 2 years and they moved homes and they forgot it. So that could be a money lying there. So we'll have to figure out the root cost analysis, and about 34,000 crore is not a small amount of money. But I also read between the lines slightly more. Why is it this sudden interest that we have picked up on unclaimed deposits, what we did not do all these years? It is not about financial stability of the system at all. I think it is more about consumer confidence in fixed deposits, of saying that the banks are the last bastion where your money is safe, and we will do this. Insurance regulator did the similar exercise of asking insurance companies to go back and repay deposits, unclaimed monies that were lying with them, with the insurance companies over a point in time. And I think banking regulator is following suit here.
Okay. Apart from consumer confidence in banks, there's another underlying reason, and that is the fact that there is not much awareness around will, there's not much awareness around inheritance, and that has in fact led to soaring high numbers. And as you mentioned, this has been traditionally a problem. 48,000 crore last year, 32,000 crore this year, which means that more and more people are now getting more aware, but that is not enough. The awareness at this point in time about will, nomination, inheritance is not enough.
See, that's true. I mean, while we have innovated for a lot of digital public goods, some of these processes, bank processes, are so frustrating, right? I mean, we have a classic case of what is frustrating the last couple of months has been this entire the safety locker agreements. I mean, what the banks forced all the safety locker clients to sign as revised agreement. And again, they said now RBI has changed those processes and we'll have to redo those. So I think we'll have to figure out what are those simplistic terms and processes can we do. Financial literacy is also about simplifying processes. Unfortunately, we still have that legacy of baggage of, queues, and we want to actually put customers in a queue. If you have digital, can you simplify it? And yes, I think we can simplify it with this entire thing. The wills, the nomination, what SEBI did, right? I mean, SEBI recently asked for every single mutual fund holder to say that who's your nomination or say opt out. So I think some of these are also about financial literacy. We need common grounds, all financial regulators to come have a common ground. We can't have a scenario where SEBI, IRDA, RBI have different rules or different thinking on some of these. A common ground where if you can link it to DigiLocker, if you can link it to KYC, if you can link it to mobile phones, and I think we can simplify a lot of these succession issues. But then, how are you going to fix the legal process? If today you have to probate a will, it's a 7 to 9 or probably 10-month process. How many people can actually afford this? So can we simplify succession planning of common Indians? I think that's the larger challenge, not just about banks.
So, Srinath, I remember a long time back, maybe 2.5 years ago, you'd written this beautiful column on Money9 around succession planning and writing a will. And it got us thinking back then also, but I think what I really want to understand from you is, typically if you look at the balance sheet of a bank, any deposit which is lying with a bank is technically a liability of the bank, right?
Correct.
So at some point, the rightful owner needs to be repatriated with the liability that the bank has on its books. So is it fair for banks, despite fairly stringent KYC norms, with multiple reminders to update, link your PAN, link your Aadhaar, link your phone number, and this whole jam trinity also, which made enormous headlines for the last 7-8 years. Now, is it unfair to expect the bank to actually find the rightful owner of a dormant account, and in the case of that rightful owner not alive anymore, a deceased rightful owner, the next of kin, the nominee, those details should not be very hard to find given the amount of KYC that goes into opening and maintaining a bank account?
See, it's not as easy as it sounds, Karthik. I mean, the last 5 years or so, we have all these mobile numbers being encoded into even the application forms of fixed deposits. So there is a way of the banks to reach out. What if somebody had deposited some money in the physical form 10 years ago and there was no mobile phone number given, there was a landline given? So the challenge for a lot of banks is they would claim, and I'm talking about largely the public sector banks, they would go by the process and say we made 3 calls, nobody picked up the call, and that's it. Or send a chitti to that letter. But if you are talking about actually using technology, artificial intelligence, social media to troll, saying that, hey, this is the name, this is the number, this is the address, is an outcome possible? Probably. Some of the private banks and private insurance companies do this to reach out. But is it of importance to them, or will they take the easier route by saying that I accumulated this in my balance sheet and now I've given it to RBI, my work is done? I think that is where this messaging from the minister and RBI seems to be, saying that you take accountability of returning that money to the customer. Okay. And is it difficult? Probably no. In the new age digital era, not at all. But let me ask you the flip question. How many times actually have you had a WhatsApp coming from your bank talking about your account, your credits you get, because that's easier SMS. But what about your FD reminders? Do you get it on your WhatsApp? Whereas every bank today in India claims to be digital banking, all that. None of them do, because it is about thinking and revisiting their processes. They still expect you to go to the branch. Most of the banks,
where they can upsell something else to you, where in addition to renewing the FD, they upsell another product to you, which may or may not be financially viable.
Absolutely. So I think while we call it digital bank, it's a sham of getting you physically to that branch.
Yeah, but I have one more concern, Srinath. Now what happens is, now the government is saying they're going to create this portal and it's going to put on display all the unclaimed deposits, and then through a process, the rightful owners or inheritors could claim that money back. My experience with, let's say, a government-run EPFO portal has been fairly horrid, if I can say it on air, right? I somehow don't have confidence in these digital portals really going ahead and simplifying the process of claiming unclaimed deposits. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I do agree with you, but I will add another layer of complication. What
Okay.
if I did not even know that I had an unclaimed deposit?
Yeah.
So by you publicizing that portal has no relevance to me. And what if I have changed 3 houses in 10 years? I mean, a typical classic tech-based services
Yeah,
professional.
or cities
role,
or
right?
even countries for that matter.
Correct. So how do you even know which bank, which branch, and people today, or the last 15 years, as we have seen, every company has a salary account with a different bank.
Yeah.
So average services professional with 15 years of experience would have at least 3 to 4 bank accounts, and they would have changed branches as well. How do you expect them to remember, hey, 16 years ago, I lived in Bangalore and I probably have 1 lakh rupees there? Not possible. And I think we'll have to go farther than this. And I think while this is a great exercise of sending confidence, but I think the accountability for banks now to increase their KYC has to increase. Otherwise, what's the point in having a name and an address where you send a chitti and it comes back and you'll say, I attempted, but nothing worked? Great. It's all over.
Let's get Ankit in. He's been dealing with some of these claimant issues and he's been dealing with some of these claimants who've been struggling to get their money back. How tardy or tedious is the process at this point in time, Ankit, to get your money back? And the portal that the ministry is hoping to form, is that going to put things in order?
Well, we hope so. The portal is still in the pipeline. There is no concrete roadmap. RBI did come out that they will combine the database of all the banks and provide it on a central platform. So we are hoping that that platform will give not just the details of the account holder, but also the amount of money pending. Because to do this exercise, one needs to first have an idea of how much amount is pending. That will determine the roadmap a legal heir will have to follow. For example, in terms of shares, if the value of certain shares are less than 5 lakh rupees, there is a simpler process to claim inheritance. Whereas, in terms of banks, there are separate limits for separate banks. There is no centralized limit provided by the RBI. All the boards of the banks provide, separate limits. For example, 10 lakhs for one bank and 20 lakhs for the other bank.
So are you suggesting that even if I can claim up to 20 lakh, the limit is 10 lakh and that's all the money I'm going to get from the bank?
No, I am suggesting the legal process to be undertaken by the legal heirs is different when the amount crosses a certain threshold. If the deceased left a will, they will have to apply for a probate. If they passed away intestate, they will have to apply for a succession certificate or a letter of administration.
And that's where things get complicated?
Yes. Courts in India, as you are aware, it takes time and costs to reach the court and bring all the legal heirs on board, so that they can come to the court and decide who amongst the legal heirs want to claim back that money.
Okay. So I want to put across a case scenario here, and in this case, assuming that my parents left certain amount for me and I'm not aware of that amount and that money is parked with the banks, what is the rightful recourse for me as a legal claimant of that money if there was no will left?
Well, if there is no will left and you are the sole legal heir, the first thing...
Okay. So the process in itself is a punishment, Karthik.
Totally. And these are 10 crore accounts that we are talking about. The number is huge. I mean, of course, the volume, if you take the mean, it's 3,500 rupees that we are talking about. But my assumption is that there would be bank accounts which will have a far larger value than 3,500 rupees in them. And then if that is the kind of paperwork required and if the portal is going to be tardy, I think at some level, I'm not sure how this is actually going to implement and find its way to the rightful owners. It's going to be a complex journey, no doubt.
Okay.
And becomes all the more complex when you're talking about mutual funds as a product category or even insurance as a product category now. It becomes more complex with those instruments than possibly pure cash or fixed deposits.
Okay. And that brings us to the larger question around wills and inheritance. There is a lack of systemic knowledge, especially amongst middle class. I haven't in my lifetime come across many people who leave a proper will behind, and maybe Srinath can also point to us, because he's been writing about will and inheritance. Srinath, what sort of knowledge do we have in our society at the moment regarding wills and inheritance? Because although we all know how important it is so as to not leave behind a family that is squabbling for your wealth, but the understanding is very, very limited.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when it comes to personal finance and legal issues around personal finance, I think the awareness is very, very poor. I mean, I would probably say 99% of middle class India is not aware of personal finance and planning, and planning includes the legal aspects of it at all. And more conversations we have, we almost feel, and I think there's a social sentiment around it. For us, the word death is a very morbid word. We don't want to discuss anything after somebody. And I think that's a challenge. And our generation, for example, is very open about it, saying that, hey, you built something in your lifetime and you want to keep it. And I think especially after COVID, there's a wake-up call, right? I mean, age or religion or whatever your background didn't matter. I mean, we lost a lot of our family and friends across society. So why is it that it's important to talk about succession plan? Why is it important to talk about your personal finances? I mean, I won't be surprised if, let's say, you run a research poll asking even CXOs in India, saying how many of them actually openly discuss their finances with their spouse. And I'm saying it in public, a hypothesis that 50% of them or over that might say they don't discuss finances with their wife.
And very interesting you pointed that out, Srinath. We were just having this discussion in the newsroom right before the show, me and my colleague discussing how they don't, people in general don't like to discuss their financials with their spouses, and that perhaps leaves
financial transparency and opacity.
Absolutely. So there absolute opacity when it comes to finances. Perhaps I think the big takeaway for me from this discussion is that be less opaque, be more transparent regarding your finances, especially with your spouses, with your family members if you can, or you will leave more unclaimed money with the banks, and it will basically go to RBI and go to government coffers at large. Hopefully the money will be utilized towards a drive where there is more financial literacy about unclaimed deposits among people in this country. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Srinath, Ankit, for your input on that very important story. Shifting focus, in a startling revelation, WhatsApp has been accused of accessing user microphones in the background. The Indian government has issued a strong response to this allegation, with Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the Minister of State for Information Technology, tweeting that the government will be investigating the allegation and called it, and I quote, unacceptable breach and violation of privacy. The minister's comments were in response to concerns raised by a Twitter engineer on 6th of May. Now, Fuad Dabiri tweeted that WhatsApp had used his microphone in the background while he was asleep and shared a timeline of WhatsApp's mic access from Android's privacy dashboard to support his claim. On 9th of May, WhatsApp responded to the allegation, stating that the issue appeared to be a bug on Android and that it had asked Google to investigate and fix the issue. WhatsApp clarified that the microphone was only accessed for calls, voice notes or videos, that it was end-to-end encrypted, meaning that WhatsApp could not hear any recordings. Therefore, according to WhatsApp, and this is the clarification that's coming from them, the issue is with Google's Android and not with the messaging platform itself. Strong allegations there coming in there from a Twitter user about WhatsApp. WhatsApp, they're actively responding that it is a problem with Google's Android and not with them. Remember, the IT Minister for Information Technology, jumped into that conversation saying that they will be seeking a response from WhatsApp. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Keep watching News 9.